made the decision to not give up.
I have certain tools that I don't want to use that I had to use last night.
These kind of police tactics have really chilled people from exercising their fundamental constitutional right to free speech.
Tear gas has been used in 100 US cities since protests began in late May. It was the most widespread use of tear gas on America's streets since the 1960s.
We were outnumbered 50-1.
We are responding to the acts of violence against our police officers, and we are responding to individuals trying to destroy our city.
But how did a gas developed for warfare become the go-to weapon for US police during protests? It all started with General Amos Fries. After tear gas was first deployed in World War I, the general wanted to keep using this new technology after the war had ended.
The general literally donated military samples to friends of his who then started these sort of entrepreneurial companies. They were able to convince law enforcement that they needed to have tear gas on hand at all times in case there were protests.
And while the Geneva Protocol categorized tear gas as a chemical warfare agent and banned its use after the First World War, tear gas found its way onto the streets around the world. But why have multiple attempts to take it off the streets failed?
Well, it really goes back to the Chemical Weapons Convention. And at the time when it was negotiated in the 90s, there was a lot of pressure to ban the chemical weapons and their use in law enforcement. But that obviously got a pushback from many countries and saying, well, we can't really give up this weapon because if we don't use tear gas, we will have to resort to more lethal weapons. The compromise that was reached was to kind of leave that option open for using the tear gas or the riot control agents in law enforcement and only in law enforcement.
We did not deploy gas on a peaceful protest. We did deploy gas on individuals who chose to use force.
If you think about the way that it's being deployed, it doesn't really distinguish between, young people and elderly, the healthy and the sick, people who are peaceful protesters or those who are using violence. But the idea is that, this has become the first trigger, the first thing that law enforcement would use as if it is going to be the way to de-escalate and to end the protest. Most of the time it's really used to suppress protests, and that's really one of the fundamental problems with that.
It was almost completely peaceful protests. There was no need for all of the chemical weapons, all of the projectiles.
When you deploy tear gas, when you resort to that, there has to be layers and layers of de-escalation steps and actions taken by law enforcement before you reach to that. And perhaps in the future we'll have a federal government that will really do the right thing by changing the rules, amending the laws, and bringing this area under control.